Hi guys, welcome back to my video. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you a lot of the things that I've learned recently about shame. And my intention and my hope is that as you watch this video, a lot of the things that I'm about to share will resonate with you, connect you deeper to yourself in some way, or help you gain an insight or an awakening or a realization that's already within you. So that is my intention for today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this video. Okay, so shame. Shame is something that we all feel at some point in our lives. We don't ever talk about shame. We don't share that with our parents. We don't share that with our friends. We don't share that with our teachers or mentors. We certainly don't even face shame within ourselves. But so, why this topic of shame? Because even when we don't acknowledge shame, shame runs in the background, invisibly, without us knowing. And sometimes we are acting out of shame without even knowing it. That was certainly my situation for a long, long time. I didn't know that I was carrying, or to be more accurate, a part of me was carrying shame from childhood trauma that I grew up with, certain experiences that really hurt me deeply. Through those experiences, I carried shame as a part of the way I see myself. So if you have found this video, maybe there's a part of you that has carried shame from the relational traumas that you've experienced. Maybe somebody actually shamed you. Maybe somebody embarrassed you or hurt you in some way. Maybe it's the way people treated you or didn't treat you very well. All of those ways can create shame or evoke the feelings of shame within me and within you. Now, the trauma itself is not always a bad thing. When you're walking on your healing journey, you're not trying to avoid to never experience trauma 100% of the time. That is not realistic and that is not the goal. Trauma can actually create post-traumatic growth, or to be short, growth. Growth in your character, in your skill set, in the way you handle yourself, in your wisdom, in your understanding of life. So, our goal isn't to experience trauma, but our goal is to learn and grow from every experience that life delivers at our doorstep. Sometimes those experiences are very, very painful. And when growth or repairs don't happen right away, they can stay stuck. And that is how parts of you, parts of us, stay stuck in those traumatic memories. And we reenact the same trauma over and over again until we actually learn them. So, why am I sharing this with you? Because if you have experienced a relational trauma that happened at some point in the past, and you are carrying, or a part of you is carrying this shameful feeling, or feeling ashamed, or shame in general, then it is likely that you will subconsciously create situations and circumstances to reinforce the feeling of shame. You don't do so consciously, but we do so subconsciously most of the time. We felt ashamed in our childhood through some experience, and then as adult, we recreate the same experience without knowing to re-experience that same thing. This is called trauma reenactment, all so that you can learn the lesson that you deeply need to learn. So let's dive into shame. So when a traumatic experience happens, we can either go into hyperarousal or hypoarousal. Hyperarousal is the fight, the anxiety, the fear. Hypoarousal is the shutdown state. It's the hiding, the depression, the shame that we feel. It's the invisibility. It's the part where you hide in your room, you hide under the blanket, you hide in the closet, either real or, metaphorically speaking. But it's that part of us that hides away, that feels ashamed of what is happening, or that feels threatened and there's a kind of danger. So, shame is a survival response. Shame is not something real where it's like you feel so ashamed of yourself, right? That you've done something wrong. It can be like that, but a lot of the times it can be our false interpretation of ourselves, right? So shame has a mechanism that when you do something that doesn't align with your morality, your ethics, you feel shame. You feel shame to correct yourself. But shame can also happen when we experience a relational trauma, a relational violation, and suddenly now you feel ashamed. You feel that you've done something wrong. For example, say somebody started yelling at you, or bullying you, or emotionally abusing you, even though you've done nothing wrong, but because they mistreated you, it created this false interpretation that you've done something wrong, that somehow you're at fault, that somehow there's something wrong with you. And that is where the shame narrative starts to develop. And so often as children, we have that shame narrative so that we can survive, so that we can hide away, we can survive, we can go to our bedroom when a parent is yelling outside or screaming or fighting, or, maybe you grew up in an alcoholic upbringing, or some kind of emotional, physical abuse, right? Those situations are really intense. So as children, you would hide away. And so that is where the feelings of shame and the narrative of shame starts to develop and run. And so as children, all you experience is you hiding, and that actually feels safe and it feels beneficial at the time, because when you're in your room and you're hiding, you are away, far away from the danger. However, as adults growing up, it starts to feel maladaptive. It starts to feel like it's no longer serving you. Maybe you're avoiding that coworker. Maybe you're avoiding certain projects. Maybe you're avoiding certain tasks or things that you know you need to do. Maybe you start to avoid things that you actually need to lean in and engage in. And so that's the thing with trauma, is that trauma, when it happens to you and it's not been repaired, either by yourself or with the person that it happened with, it then can create a space where you misinterpret what to go for and what to stay away from. The messages tend to get mixed up. You start to go towards things that are bad for you, that are familiar but bad for you, because you want to heal them, right? It's trauma reenactment. You're recreating the same situation because you're trying to relearn the same lessons, the lessons that you haven't yet learned. And at the same time, you are avoiding what is actually beneficial and good for you. Maybe it's a dream job, maybe it's a career, maybe it's a resume that you've put off, maybe it's a friendship or a romantic relationship or a date or traveling or going to a new place, something like that, right? A hobby. So trauma can mix up those messages of where to go, where to focus on versus what to avoid, right? It changes how we perceive what is healthy and what is unhealthy boundaries for ourselves and for the things around us. So, when you experience shame, you can find yourself in a hypoarousal state most of the time. Maybe you feel exhausted, tired, like you don't have energy. And maybe you say yes more often than you would like to. Maybe you people please your way through life because it feels safe to do so. A lot of those tendencies actually operates from this underlying under this background of shame. Shame makes it hard for you to set boundaries because in order to set boundaries, your nervous system needs to be somewhat in a neutral or activated state. But shame has shut down your nervous system, and that is why it makes it harder for you to set boundaries with people, situation, places that you really need to set boundaries with that aren't even healthy for you. So, if you find yourself or your nervous system operating in this shutdown state, hard to set boundaries, saying yes a lot of the times, feeling tired, low energy, right? Feeling like you want to hide, you don't want to expose yourself, or you don't want to express yourself. That is when you know shame is operating in the background. Shame can also speak like an inner critic that shames you, right? So that's another way that it would show up. So shame prevents you from self express and self expose. What that means is when shame is running in the background, you don't want to speak up for yourself. You feel afraid. What if I speak up and what if they judge me? What if I speak up and what if it's wrong? What if people don't understand what I say? What if I say something wrong and then everything would go bad? Right? So that's the fear of self expression. So shame makes it hard to self express. And that can go with creativity, certain hobbies, right? And the other side is self expose. It's being who you are, it's being your authentic self in the world. Now, a lot of us wear masks in this world. This world makes it so unsafe to be our authentic selves. A lot of people have broke out of that, paradigm and created a lot of safety to be our authentic selves. And maybe you found a lot of them online or in your day-to-day life. But still, a lot of us, a lot of people operate with a mask on, right? And the mask is there to protect some sort of insecurity, some sort of fear. But when shame is running in the background, that's when you are afraid of exposing yourself. You don't want to show your authentic self. You're afraid. You're afraid, what if I am really who I am? What if I'm really showing who I am? What if they don't love me? What if they don't accept me? What if I don't belong? What if they exclude me? What if I'm not good enough? What if I don't matter? All right, so shame can operate in a very subtle way in the background. And I found that shame is not often spoken about. It's usually spoken about, under the inner critic or a lack of self worth. But shame is the underlying piece of it all. And shame is developed through relational traumas. I believe that. Because some way, somehow, that narrative was developed through some sort of violation or abuse or mistreatment that happened between you and another person. So, I'm going to share a couple of examples here that I found very helpful. So, the first one is if you grew up with a violent parent at home, this is where shame very much likely was created. You hear that parent walk through the door, you hear the key, you know, um, going in, and you kind of know that they're coming home. You start to go into your room, you hide. You don't want to interact with that parent. Maybe or maybe you smell the alcohol, right, when that person comes home. So all of those little things, subtle things, right, that you pick up in your childhood with a violent or unsafe parent, and you start to hide yourself, you start to separate yourself, which is all beneficial for you at that time and best for your survival. But that whole circumstance right? That creates this shame narrative. Like, I'm not worthy and deserving of love, right? So as children, we start to develop those narratives. I have to hide who I am to be safe. I have to hide to be safe. I have to be away from my primary caregivers to be safe. It's not safe to connect. It's not safe to show my joy. It's not safe to share about my day with a parent. It's not safe to express my world to my family. So that is where the shame narrative starts to develop in the circumstance where you had a violent parent. Another one is being bullied at school. Being bullied at school is um, it's it touches on a very major developmental part of our upbringing as teenagers, children, adolescents. Our main part of development is the need for belonging, the need to fit in, right? Somebody has something, you want that same thing. Everybody wears this, you want to wear the same thing. Everybody has an iPhone, you want to have an iPhone. There's that kind of externally trying to fit in, trying to belong, trying to look the same, trying to be accepted, right? Socially and externally. And so bullying can interrupt that and can create a lot of relational traumas and can also create a lot of shame narratives. You start to think to yourself, oh, well, something's wrong with me, right? That's why people are bullying me. Something's bad about me. That's why people are treating me this way. Something must be wrong with me. That's why people are treating me this way. Those are the narratives that start to create. And even in adulthood, so you go to a workplace and people mistreated you, right? But if you've carried some sort of wound from your childhood, you might interpret that same thing. Somebody mistreated me at work. Something must be wrong with me. When the truth is, no, it's not like that, right? It's their problems that they're projecting on you. So that's another example. I thought this other example was very, very interesting because it's very subtle and nuanced. So the last example that I'm going to give you for today is when you have a parent or both parents working all the time, right? They don't pay attention to you. They don't have as much time to spend with you at home. They don't have as much time to be present with you. Maybe they only take care of your physical needs, but not your emotional needs. They don't have the capacity or the time or the self-awareness to be there for you. So in this circumstance, shame can also be created because the narrative that starts to develop is, I'm not worthy of their time. I'm not worthy of being attentive to. I'm not worthy of being loved. I'm not worthy of, being cared for, right? So we start to interpret those behaviors from our parents in a way where it's like shame, like something's wrong with me, right? There must be something wrong with me. So those narratives run in the background. So as you're watching this, I encourage you to gently and softly look into your past, look into circumstances where maybe a part of you carries shame due to some sort of hardship that you grew up with or a relational trauma that you've experienced. To tread this carefully, slowly, and with a lot of loving compassion. Because shame is something very, very difficult, very hard to look at, right? It requires a lot of your loving attention. And so when you're looking into this, really make sure you do so with slowness, gentleness, compassion. Really look in and give those parts of yourself a lot of love, a lot of understanding, a lot of holding and nurturing, because these parts have went through so much as children, and they deeply long for your love. So thank you for watching this video. I hope that it's been helpful. And if you did like it, like it or comment, let me know what resonated with you. And I look forward to be with you again in my next videos.